So, you want to become the ultimate space emo. Well, luckily for you, we got this tutorial. First and foremost, as me just speaking to you guys for a minute, this jacket kind of sucks. It's so bad of me to say. If you follow this tutorial, it's not going to look exactly like this. It's going to look 1,000 million times better because you'll be drafting your own pattern and you probably won't screw up as much as I did. On that note, here's just a few things that you gotta remember if you wanna sew stuff. The first thing is 5/8 seam allowance is like the standard sewing seam allowance, yeah. Second thing is to always finish your edges. If you don't have a serger, you can easily do a zigzag stitch around the edges, which, you know, prevents them from fraying and coming undone. 3 is to always do a mock-up before you start. Like, I kid you not, it was so helpful doing a mock-up. And the last thing is just make sure your top stitching matches your rest of your stitching in the colored fabric. And yeah, just have fun with it. Okay, we can start now, I guess. Yeah, so the first thing you're gonna need is a list of supplies. So to make this jacket, it consisted of a variety of different fabric-y things. Anyways, for what I did, I used 1.5 yards of red cotton, 1.5 yards of black lining, because it's lined. I also, as a heads up, did not line the sleeves of the jacket because, like, I hate constricting things. Like, I hate long sleeves in general. I don't like constricting things. But if you want to add in sleeves, it's really easy. You only need a little bit more fabric and totally go for it if you want to. So bias tape too, white bias tape to do the stripes. And the this thingy, you only need 1 package. Stretch knit, you want 1/4 yard. I made the mistake of buying 1/8 yard because it was like a longer one, you know, and it wasn't enough, so this is thin and I wanted to make it thicker. You need 5/8 yard of white fabric. Interfacing, you're also going to want 1/8 yard. If you don't know what that is, it's basically what's making the collar stand up right now. Let's move on to actual sewing instructions. The first thing I did, which you can easily do by going to a thrift store and finding something, is I found a jacket, like a short length jacket, and I was like, okay, this is about the length that I wanted for Keith. This is about the style too. And I used this to trace out a pattern using newspaper. I kind of tucked in this. I traced the front side. One of the front, there's a seam right here on the side of it, and then on the back there's another seam. What I did not trace is the sleeves because, you know, these are derpy and they're really constricting, so I actually just took a sleeve pattern from a sweatshirt pattern I made a while back. If it's easier for you, just trace the sleeves of it. So this is like a tight-fitting size 2 jacket, and I was just like, I'm gonna do this and trace it. So all I did was trace it onto, and that's gonna be your first outline of your pattern grafting. So on these pieces, right, you're gonna wanna sketch out loosely the design of Keith with the yellow stripes and the like Y on the back of it, but leave out like the stripes on the side, and yeah, that's basically all you need to leave out. Do the yellow thing here, the red thing at the bottom, and the Y on the back. So we got the front over here, the like side section, the back parts, and then the sleeve. And then what I did was I added on where I want to add in all the details to Keith's jacket. So I got like the white stripe, then I got the yellow stripe, and then I have the thingy that goes at the bottom that I'm actually going to cut off of it. And I just kind of transferred that onto all the different pieces and drew them out. And I also measured everything too, so woo. And now I'm going to transfer them again, but this time take into account the 5/8 inch seam allowance. So basically it's just going to get a tiny bit bigger. I cannot stress enough how important this 5/8 is that you add it in, because if you don't add it in, it's gonna be a super tiny jacket that you're not gonna be able to get on, so it's really important. Okay, so I took one of my pattern pieces, like this one is the back piece, and I added a 5/8 inch seam allowance to it, right? So now they're a little bit bigger, and this one is the lining for it because I plan on lining my jacket. And then after this, I'm actually going to cut across the dotted lines and then add seam allowance to all these individual pieces. Okay, so I finally finished adding seam allowance to everything. Right here I have the front part of the jacket, the top, the middle yellow thing, the bottom, and then I have the back part with the weird Y shape, and then I have the lining pieces and the sleeve. Okay, after I got all the pieces figured out and which colors they go, I doubled over the fabric, right, because I needed 2 of each piece that I cut out. The pieces that I cut on the fold of the fabric were the Y in the back of the jacket, and the sleeves because I wanted to make my life easier. So I only had to cut out one of the Ys, but 2 of the sleeves. I got all the pattern pieces. Instead of jumping right into it, I made a mock-up because I was terrified. I had no clue what I was doing, and I'm like, you know what? Why not? Okay, so you got your mock-up done. It looked pretty nice if you actually did it, and you're ready to move on to the real thing. So the first thing you're gonna want to do is have your actual fabric. I already explained this. Cut out the pattern pieces, and bam, we are good to sew. Pun intended. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna want to do for the jacket is the lining. So lining is super easy. I didn't do sleeves, as I said. If you want to, it's a little bit more work, but barely. So the lining pieces, literally, you cut out the front, you sew it to the side. It's also on a curve, so it's not gonna line up perfectly, but as long as that 5/8 line matches up, you're good to go. If you haven't sewn on a curve, you're probably like, what is this chick talking about? That's so wrong. But if you have, you know what I'm talking about, and you know how confusing it is, and you know I am right. So anyways, you sew the front to the side, and then the side to the back. No guarantees that your jacket is actually going to have a side seam, because most of them are just a front, a back, and a front, and sleeves. If you look on the front of your jacket, is this front seam right here. This red, yellow, and red piece. So when you're doing this too, I also doubled the yellow fabric on it. That way it packs a bigger punch, it's more vibrant, it doesn't have that like yellow wash, like, you know, the black tint behind it, and it looks more pure of a color. Right sides together, you're going to want to sew these pieces all together so you have a lovely looking top side. I also, when I did this, I finished the edge and then I sewed it one direction, top stitched it down, then I flipped it the other direction, top stitched again. So this is actually double top stitched, and it looks really nice. I did it once in yellow, then another time in red, then I went to the other side, did it in yellow and red. Once I got this piece down, I moved on to the other side of the jacket, and I did this piece. So the last part for the outside of the jacket that we're gonna wanna do is the Y section, where I took the white fabric I was using, and then I used scrap muslin, and I just put it underneath it, and I doubled this up. So when I sewed these 2 pieces, the red to the white, right sides together always, of course, and then I serged it. So you got these 2 pieces sewn together, right? You serged it. So you see where the Y is, like right here at this crease, where it has a sharp turn, like an absolute value graph, right? You know what I'm talking about? So you're gonna wanna cut out little snippets, which is what you do on a curve anyways, to keep it from gathering and bunching. Trust me on this. Like, I know it sounds weird, but it works, and it's beautiful. It's an amazing trick. And then you're gonna wanna press it to the outside and top stitch it down with red. And that is basically it. So the back part's done, the inside's done, and you wanna know, how do I put these things together? Well, the answer is ribbing. I used Ribnet. I bought white fabric, so I had to dye this, and I borrowed dye from Maya, and I was like, I'll only use a little bit, I promise. And I dyed it once, and it came out like tie-dye, and then I dyed it again because I finally knew what I was doing. But if you have to dye fabric for this, I have to suggest add in salt. It makes it brighter. Stir it around frequently to wash it out a bunch, use fabric, soapy stuff, and let it dry. Then I put right sides together. I sewed it to one side of this, right? And then I sewed it to the back. So I had like one massive sheet of fabric. But just be careful with ribbing. Like, there's that square parallel lines on one side, and the wrong side of the fabric looks kind of off, so just be sure that you're matching your right sides together. We're gonna get into some fun stuff now. The next part is the bias tape, which is on the side seam of the jacket. I ironed out the bias tape as much as I needed. I folded in the edges and I lined it up into this. So this right now, pretend this is inside out, right? With right sides together, this smack dab in the center of it. And then I just sewed 5/8 of a line. So this right here, this little section is 3/8. And then I just finished it up at the top edge over here. So then when I opened it up, it started to look like a jacket. Finally, we got this side done, this side done, and we got this edge done over here. So the collar is just like the sleeves in the sense that it's one giant rectangle that you're doing. This top part right here is just folded over, and I believe the collar on mine is 4 inches. Yeah, it's 4 inches in total, and then I subtracted 5/8 of a seam allowance, so it's actually, 3 3/8 of an inch this is. So what I cut my interfacing to was the exact same length as this is, minus the edges that I finished on both sides, and I cut this interfacing down. So instead of being 4 inches, it was 3 3/4 inch. That way there was just a little bit of room in case I messed up. Like when you're buying this stuff, don't get super thick interfacing, but don't get really thin. You don't want it to be flimsy, but you don't want it to be super, super stiff. So you want to go with something in between and just shove it in that rectangle after you flip it inside out. And then you want to find the center point of your collar, match it up with the center point of your jacket with the Y shape, and you're gonna kind of tuck it in there like a sandwich, like a sewing sandwich, and just sew along that one curved back seam, not the shoulder seam. Like an example of this would be on the mock-up is what I did. That's what we're doing before you do the shoulder seam. And the next thing to do is I jumped to the sleeves. So as far as the sleeves go, for the white border on it, I cut out a rectangle. This right here, the cuff of the sleeve is actually folded over. You can cut out a massive rectangle and then fold it in half, or 2 smaller rectangles and then just fold them together. But that's just so it looks really nice and you don't have to finish off the edge and then have that edge showing. And then on that rectangle, I sewed right sides together. So on that rectangle, I sewed it together, so then you have a circle and you fold it inwards on itself. So it's kind of like a French seam, as in the sense that it's hidden, Okay, so now you got the cuff of your sleeve. Now you want to move on to the base of the sleeve. Before you actually make the sleeve shape of it, you're going to want to grab your bias tape, open it up, and iron it down. That way it's now 2 inches instead of 1. What I did for this is I cut out a strip of fabric and I actually doubled it up so it's thicker and you don't see the red as much like bleeding through it, right? And then I just found where the center seam was down here when you fold it in half and it's equal, and I top stitched it on and it looked really nice when I was done. This I did not do 5/8. I think I did like a 1/4 or something. I don't really remember. Just like right up against the edge of the foot as close as you can get it without it looking uneven. And then once you got this in, you can fold it right sides together and complete the arm circle thing. The next part is a little tricky. I actually didn't finish the seam because I'm lazy, but I'm going to later. So you're going to want to put the cuff on the outside of your sleeve and the sleeve on the inside of the cuff, and you're going to want to sew around the edge of this, which can be really hard. Be sure to use a lot of pins so you don't get messed up, and make sure that the edges actually align. Once you're done, you can just fold it inside out and you got this beautiful, amazing seam, which you're going to repeat the same process again for the sleeve on the other side of the jacket. Okay, so now you got your 2 sleeves done, right? Put those off to the side. Leave them there for a bit because we're gonna do lace shoulder seams. This for me was honestly the hardest part and it frustrated me so much. So prepare yourself. Right sides together, I had to take the 2 red pieces, right? Fold it like this inside out and sew it over. Then I had to take bias tape, iron it, press it open, cut out a little strip of white fabric, and I had to top stitch it down so it looked like this. And then for the shoulder seam on the lining, because we don't want that seam to show, you do the exact same process where the seam is facing on the inside and the nice folded over part is on the inside of the shoulder. Okay, so after you sew the shoulder seams, you can move on to the sleeve. Remember for this, right sides together, more than anything, the most important thing is to make sure that these 2 white stripes match up at 5/8 of an inch. And you're gonna want to right sides together sew it. It's gonna be a little bit difficult because you do have the lining in there, but you're gonna want to flip it inside out, sew around here, pin it like crazy, I swear to God, and pray that your sleeves are just as big as your armholes. Now that you got your sleeves done, the only thing you gotta do is attach your collar and then you're done. This was done by hand with a hidden stitch. If there is a way you know how to do this by machine, please comment down below because I have no clue honestly how to do this by machine. So it was done by hand and lined up, which is why it's not as nice as the rest of it, but that is basically how you finish off your collar. And I think that goes over everything that I did. Anyways, this is the progress to my Keith cosplay from Voltron Legendary Defender. I can now be a space emo. But next I just gotta do the utility belt and like make myself some Keith boots. I am so tired right now. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. If any of this was confusing, please feel free to comment or DM me or anything and I will answer any questions you have. And yeah, I hope you like my space emo. Maya's cosplaying Pidge, and you should also go spam official Ghosty to cosplay Lance so we can do some Lance. Yeah, that's all I got for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope this video was at least a little bit helpful. Sorry if it was really confusing, because I know I'm confused right now. And yeah, I'm gonna stop talking because it's probably like 1 in the morning by now. Thank you guys so much. See you in my next video, and so long.